Hi folks, it's Andrew here from Plainfield Public Library, back once again with another episode from our live classic serial series. We've been going through some stories from the adventures of Sherlock Holmes, and this is going to be part 2 of The Man with the Twisted Lip. So if you're new here, we've been doing this for a couple of years, reading through a lot of different stories, and we're just working our way, as I said, through this Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. You will find a playlist that has our previously recorded episodes of the story if you want to catch up, and if you go over to the library's Facebook page, you'll find that there's an archive there of our Facebook Live things that go back over the last couple of years for more than a dozen big books. Anyway, let's get back to the story at hand. This was the affair of the man with the twisted lip. We're looking for Mr. Sinclair, who seems to have gone missing in an opium den somewhere in the east of London, and Sherlock Holmes and Watson have been enlisted to try and find him. Well, it looks a lot like he might have been done away with. There's certainly a lot of evidence that seems to point that way. But towards the end of things yesterday, Holmes and Watson went out to the home of Mr. Sinclair, where they met with his wife, and his wife had received a letter in her husband's hand, but apparently posted by someone else. She's very sure that it's definitely written by him, and seems to point to the idea that he is certainly still alive. But circumstances and the rest of the evidence seem to be against that. So where are we with that? Well, let's carry on the story and find out what happens. I believe that we should get finished with that today. Before I do get started today, though, I want to just advert the next thing that's going to happen, which is going to be that on Monday we're going to take a break from Sherlock Holmes, and we're going to start reading from Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. So looking forward to that. That's going to be part of the materials that we're going to put out as part of our summer reading festivities and events. The theme for summer reading is Oceans of Possibilities, so I'm kind of going on the oceans theme to put some pirates on the ocean, and where you have pirates you have Treasure Island. Anyway, let's get back to The Man with the Twisted Lip. Sherlock Holmes has heard this letter that Mrs. Sinclair has in her possession, and doesn't want to discourage her too much, but he needs to continue with his investigation if he's going to find out exactly what it means, and whether or not it means that her husband is still alive. In this letter you certainly have a very strong piece of evidence to corroborate your view that your husband's still alive. But if your husband is alive and able to write letters, why should he remain away from you? I cannot imagine. It's unthinkable. And on Monday he made no remarks before leaving you? No. And you were surprised to see him in Swandam Lane? Very much so. Was the window open? Yes. Then he might have called to you. He might. He only, as I understand, gave an inarticulate cry. Yes. A call for help, you thought? Yes. He waved his hand. But it might have been a cry of surprise. Astonishment at the unexpected sight of you might cause him to throw up his hands. It is possible. And you thought he was pulled back. He disappeared so suddenly. He might have leapt back. You did not see anyone else in the room? No, but this horrible man confessed to having been there, and the building manager was at the foot of the stairs. Quite so. Your husband, as far as you could see, had his ordinary clothes on, but without his collar or tie. I distinctly saw his bare throat. Had he ever spoken of Swandam Lane? Never. Had he ever shown any signs of having taken opium? Never. Thank you, Mrs. Sinclair. Those are the principal points about which I wished to be absolutely clear. We shall now have a little supper, and then retire, for we may have a very busy day tomorrow. A large and comfortable double-bedded room had been placed at our disposal, and I was quickly between the sheets, for I was weary after my night of adventure. Sherlock Holmes was a man, however, whom, when he had an unsolved problem in his mind, would go for days, and even for a week, without rest, turning it over, rearranging his facts, looking at it from every point of view, until he'd either fathomed it, or convinced himself that his data were insufficient. It was soon evident to me that he was now preparing for an all-night sitting. He took off his coat and waistcoat, put on a large blue dressing-gown, and then wandered about the room collecting pillows from his bed and cushions from the sofa and armchairs. With these he constructed a sort of eastern divan, upon which he perched himself cross-legged, with an ounce of shag tobacco and a box of matches laid out in front of him. In the dim light of the lamp I saw him sitting there, an old briar pipe between his lips, his eyes fixed vacantly upon the corner of the ceiling, the blue smoke curling up from him, silent, motionless, with the light shining upon his strong set aquiline features. So he sat as I dropped off to sleep, and so he sat when a sudden ejaculation caused me to wake up, and I found the summer sun shining into the apartment. The pipe was still between his lips, the smoke still curled upwards, and the room was full of a dense tobacco haze, but nothing remained of the heap of shag which I had seen upon the previous night. "Awake, Watson?" he asked. "Yes. Game for a morning drive?" "Certainly." "Then dress. No one's stirring yet, but I know where the stable boy sleeps, and we shall soon have the trap out." He chuckled to himself as he spoke. His eyes twinkled, and he seemed a different man to the sombre thinker of the previous night. As I dressed, I glanced at my watch. It was no wonder that no one was stirring. It was 25 minutes past 4. I had hardly finished when Holmes returned with the news that the boy was putting in the horse. "I want to test a theory of mine," said he, pulling on his boots. "I think, Watson, that you are now standing in the presence of one of the most absolute fools in Europe. I deserve to be kicked from here to Charing Cross, but I think I have the key of the affair now." "And where is it?" I asked, smiling. "In the bathroom," he answered. "Yes, I'm not joking," he continued, seeing my look of incredulity. "I've just been there, and I've taken it out, and I have got it in this Gladstone bag. Come on, my boy, and we shall see whether or not it will fit the lock." We made our way downstairs as quietly as possible, and out into the bright morning sunshine. In the road stood our horse and trap, with the half-clad stable boy waiting at the head. We both sprang in, and away we dashed down the London road. A few country carts were stirring, bearing in vegetables to the metropolis, but the lines of villas on either side were as silent and lifeless as some city in a dream. "It has been in some points a singular case," said Holmes, flicking the horse on to a gallop. "I confess that I have been as blind as a mole, but it is better to learn wisdom late than never to learn it at all." In town, the earliest risers were just beginning to look sleepily from their windows as we drove through the streets of the Surrey side. Passing down the Waterloo Bridge Road, we crossed over the river, and dashing up Wellington Street, wheeled sharply to the right, and found ourselves in Bow Street. Sherlock Holmes was well known to the force, and the two constables at the door saluted him. One of them held the horse's head, while the other led us in. "Who is on duty?" asked Holmes. "Inspector Bradstreet, sir." "Ah, Bradstreet, how are you?" A tall, stout official had come down the stone-flagged passage in a peaked cap and frogged jacket. "I wish to have a quiet word with you, Bradstreet." "Certainly, Mr. Holmes. Step into my room here." It was a small, office-like room with a huge ledger upon the table and a telephone projecting from the wall. The inspector sat down at his desk. "What can I do for you, Mr. Holmes?" "I called about that beggar man, Boone, the one who was charged with being concerned in the disappearance of Mr. Neville Sinclair of Lee." "Yes, he was brought up and remanded for further inquiries." "So I heard. You have him here?" "In the cells." "Is he quiet?" "Oh, he gives no trouble, but he is a dirty scoundrel." "Dirty?" "Yes, so we can do to make him wash his hands, and his face is... Well, once his case has been settled, he will have a regular prison bath, and I think if you saw him you would agree with me that he needed it." "I should like to see him very much." "Would you? That's easily done. Come this way. You can leave your bag." No, I think that I'll take it." "Very good. Come this way, if you please." He led us down a passage, opened a barred door, passed down a winding stair, and brought us to a whitewashed corridor, with a line of doors on either side. "Third on the right is his," said the inspector. "Here it is." He quietly shot back a panel in the upper part of the door and glanced through. "He's asleep," said he. "You can see him very well." We both put our eyes to the grating. The prisoner lay with his face towards us in very deep sleep, breathing slowly and heavily. He was a middle-sized man, coarsely clad as became his calling, with a coloured shirt protruding through the rent in his tattered coat. He was, as the inspector had said, extremely dirty. The grime which covered his face could not conceal its repulsive ugliness. A broad wheal from an old scar ran right across it from eye to chin. and by its contraction had turned up one side of the upper lip, so that 3 teeth were exposed in a perpetual snarl. A shock of very bright red hair grew low over his eyes and forehead. "He's a beauty, isn't he?" said the inspector. "He certainly needs a wash," remarked Holmes. "I had an idea that he might, and took the liberty of bringing the tools with me." He opened the Gladstone bag as he spoke, and took out, to my astonishment, a very large bath sponge. "You're a funny one," chuckled the inspector. "Now, if you will have the great goodness to open that door very quietly, we will soon make him cut a much more respectable figure." "Well, I don't know why not," said the inspector. "He doesn't look a credit to the Bow Street cells, does he?" He slipped his key into the lock, and we all very quietly entered the cell. The sleeper half turned and then settled down once more into a deep slumber. Holmes stooped to the water jug, moistened his sponge, and then rubbed it twice, vigorously across and down the prisoner's face. "Let me introduce you," he shouted, "to Mr. Neville St. Clair, of Lee, in the county of Kent." Never in my life have I seen such a sight. The man's face peeled off under the sponge, like the bark from a tree. Gone was the coarse brown tint. Gone, too, was the horrid scar which seamed it across, and the twisted lip which had given the repulsive sneer to his face. A twitch brought away the tangled red hair, and there, sitting up in his bed, was a pale, sad-faced, refined-looking man, black-haired and smooth-skinned, rubbing his eyes and staring about him with sleepy bewilderment. Then, suddenly realizing the exposure, he broke into a scream and threw himself down with his face to the pillow. "Great heavens!" cried the inspector. "It is indeed the missing man. I know him from the photograph." The prisoner turned, with the reckless air of a man who abandoned himself to his destiny. "Be it so," said he. "And pray what am I charged with?" "With making away with Mr. Neville. Oh, come, you can't be charged with it unless they make a case of attempted suicide of it," said the inspector with a grin. "Well, I've been 27 years in the force, but this really takes the cake. If I am Mr. Neville St. Clair, then it is obvious that no crime has been committed, and that therefore I am illegally detained." "No crime? But a very great error has been committed," said Holmes. "You would have done better to have trusted your wife." "It was not the wife, it was the children," groaned the prisoner. "God help me, I would not have them ashamed of their father. My God, what an exposure! What can I do?" Sherlock Holmes sat down beside him on the couch and patted him kindly on the shoulder. "If you can leave it to a court of law to clear the matter up," said he, "of course you can hardly avoid publicity. On the other hand, if you convince the police authorities that there's no possible case against you, I do not know that there is any reason that the details should find their way into the papers. Inspector Bradstreet would, I'm sure, make notes upon anything which you might tell us and submit it to the proper authorities. The case would then never go into court at all." "God bless you," cried the prisoner passionately. "I would have endured imprisonment, even execution, rather than have left my miserable secret as a family blot to my children." "You are the first who have ever heard my story. My father was a schoolmaster in Chesterfield, where I received an excellent education. I travelled in my youth, took to the stage, and finally became a reporter on an evening paper in London. One day my editor wished to have a series of articles upon begging in the metropolis, and I volunteered to supply them. There was the point from which all my adventures started. It was only by trying begging as an amateur that I could get the facts upon which to base my articles. When an actor, I had of course learned all the secrets of making up, and had been famous in the green room for my skill. I took advantage now of my attainments. I painted my face. To make myself as pitiable as possible, I made a good scar, and fixed one side of my lip in a twist by the aid of a small slip of flesh-coloured plaster. Then, with a red head of hair and an appropriate dress, I took my station in the business part of the city, ostensibly as a match-seller, but really as a beggar. For 7 hours I plied my trade, and when I returned home in the evening I found to my surprise that I had received no less than 26 shillings 4pence. I wrote my articles, and thought little more of the matter until some time later I backed a bill for my friend, and had a writ served upon me for £25. I was at my wit's end where to get the money, but a sudden idea came to me. I begged a fortnight's grace from the creditor, asked for a holiday from my employers, and spent the time in begging in the city under my disguise. In 10 days I had the money, and had paid the debt. Well, you can imagine how hard it was. to settle down to arduous work at £2 a week, when I knew that I could earn as much in a day by smearing my face with a little paint, laying my cap on the ground and sitting still. It was a long fight between my pride and the money, but the dollars won at last, and I threw up reporting and sat day after day in the corner which I had first chosen, inspiring pity by my ghastly face and filling my pockets with coppers. Only one man knew my secret. He was the keeper of a low den in which I used to lodge in Swandam Lane, where I could every morning emerge as a squalid beggar, and in the evenings transform myself into a well-dressed man about town. This fellow was well paid by me for his rooms, so that I knew that my secret was safe in his possession. Well, very soon I found that I was saving considerable sums of money. I do not mean that any beggar in the streets of London could earn £700 a year, which is less than my average takings, but I had exceptional advantages in my power of making up, and also in a facility of repartee, which improved by practice and made me quite a recognised character in the city. All day a stream of pennies, varied by silver, poured in upon me, and it was a very bad day in which I failed to take £2. As I grew richer, I grew more ambitious, took a house in the country, and eventually married without anyone having a suspicion as to my real occupation. My dear wife knew that I had business in the city. She little knew what. Last Monday I had finished for the day and was dressing in my room above the opium den when I looked out of my window and saw, to my horror and astonishment, that my wife was standing in the street with her eyes fixed full upon me. I gave a cry of surprise, threw up my arms to cover my face, and rushing to my confidant, entreated him to prevent anyone from coming up to me. I heard her voice downstairs, but I knew that she could not ascend. Swiftly I threw off my clothes, pulled on those of a beggar, and put on my pigments and wig. Even a wife's eyes could not pierce so complete a disguise. But then it occurred to me that there might be a search in the room, and that the clothes might betray me. I threw open the window, reopening by my violence a small cut which I had inflicted upon myself in the bedroom that morning. Then I seized my coat, which was weighted by the coppers which I had just transferred to it from the leather bag in which I had carried my takings. I hurled it out of the window, and it disappeared into the Thames. The other clothes would have followed, but at that moment there was a rush of constables up the stair, and a few minutes after I found, rather I confess to my relief, that instead of being identified as Mr. Neville Sinclair, I was arrested as his murderer. I do not know that there is anything else for me to explain. I was determined to preserve my disguise as long as possible, and hence my preference for a dirty face. Knowing that my wife would be terribly anxious, I slipped off my ring, and confided it to the building manager at a moment when no constable was watching me, together with a hurried scrawl, telling her that she had no cause to fear. That note only reached her yesterday, said Holmes. Good God, what a week she must have spent. The police have watched this man to whom you entrusted the letter, said Inspector Bradstreet, and I can quite understand that he might find it difficult to post a letter unobserved. Probably he handed it to some sailor customer of his, who forgot all about it for some days. That was it, said Holmes, nodding approvingly. I have no doubt of it. But have you never been prosecuted for begging? Many times. But what was a fine to me? It must stop here, however, said Bradstreet. If the police are to hush this thing up, there must be no more of Hugh Boone. I have sworn it, by the most solemn oaths which a man can take. In that case, I think it is probable that no further steps may be taken, but if you are found again, then all must come out. I am sure, Mr. Holmes, that we are very much indebted to you for having cleared the matter up. I wish I knew how you reach your results. I reached this one, said my friend, by sitting upon 5 pillows and consuming an ounce of shag tobacco. I think, Watson, that if we drive to Baker Street now, we shall just be in time for breakfast. Well, folks, that's the end of that story, and that will be the end of Sherlock Holmes for us right now. We will return to read some more from this particular set of stories soon. But as I said right at the beginning there today, we're going to move on Monday, and we are going to begin reading from Treasure Island as part of our programs and other things that we're doing in support of our summer reading programs. The summer reading program is an ocean of possibilities, and of course with pirates and the oceans we've got a bit of a theme building up. So we're going to begin with Treasure Island on Monday the 11th at 2 p.m. I hope you can join me for that, and we'll read through that story and get back to Sherlock Holmes again after that one. So thanks for joining me again today, and I do wish you all a very good weekend indeed. Thanks a lot, and bye bye for now. See you next time. Bye bye.